it is the separation that is the root of all pain.
Yeah.
And when you feel this union inside of yourself, which is spirit, which, is it out of us? Is it in us? As below, as above, as below, we're all one. When you feel it, experience this oneness, there's no need for religion. There's no need for this dogma.
True.
And that's what I mean when I say I feel like it fucked me up, because it just took away my spirit in one way.
Yeah. Welcome to Mind the Shift, where we talk about shifting minds in a shifting world. My name is Anders Bolling, and I'm your host. Today I have as my guest a friend and fellow podcaster who one might describe as an explorer and harnesser of bodily and spiritual power. Blossom Bamboo, joining us from beautiful Amsterdam. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Anders. Wow, that was, it's an honor. It's an honor to be here. And I would like to start this day with a huge appreciation for life, appreciation that I woke up this morning and I was aware of that first breath. And the first thing I thought of was, wow, I'm alive. And then later I realized I come from America. And then later I realized that this is traditional day of Thanksgiving in America.
Yeah, it is.
So,
the day that we record this, it's Thanksgiving. Yeah. So
in America, yeah. And
what does that represent for you?
For me, it means that every day is the day of Thanksgiving. That in order to shift our minds for the shifting world, which I love your introduction, that it really begins with this attitude of gratitude. Like every day is Thanksgiving. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. I'm so excited and I'm honored to have you here, Blossom. I know you have a lot of wonderful things to say about life, and you have some really interesting experiences that others can learn from, I'm sure. So let's dive a little bit into that. And first, would you agree on my first very brief description of you as an
Yes.
explorer and harnesser of bodily and spiritual power? You would.
Yes,
Yeah,
that was a very well curated description of my much longer biography that I sent you. So thank you very much for that.
Good.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you about, of course, your visions, your plans going forward, and also your view on life. But first, I'd like to talk a little bit about your background. You're, as you said, an American in Holland, in the Netherlands. You've been there for a couple of decades.
Yeah.
And you and I, we're both middle-aged, and we all have, like everyone else, we have our fair share of defining experiences in life. But I think you have a different personal history than most people. I would say. I don't know if you agree, but you call yourself. Told me beforehand here, or you wrote in a little text here that you call yourself a dysfunctional family chain breaker.
Yeah.
And I would like you to elaborate a little bit on that. Are you breaking free of some kind of detrimental old pattern? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that this primarily focuses on the female generational line. In modern psychology and in some methods, they're calling this now the mother wound, which we all have in some way, shape, or form. But when in my own process of healing or self-discovery and self-knowledge, learning, who am I? And getting to know myself better and better, I came across family constellations. And in this method, you put all of your family, and in this case, it was the mother line, you put your ancestors behind you in order to really get in touch with what's been going on.
Yeah.
I didn't really necessarily have to do that in that way because I already knew, but it really shone a lot of light on the depth of the dysfunctionality. Um, and I've got all kinds of theories that it's because of patriarchy or whatever, or women being held down, not being able to really shine in their full power, their full feminine power, and their full glory. I come from a long line of Christianity. So that is also women coming from most religious cultures are not given the space to fully show up and to fully be empowered in their femininity.
Mm.
So, to your question, the way I literally see it, like the way I can visualize it, is we have a chain.
Yeah.
You come from your mother or your father
Mm.
and their father and their father and their mother and their mother. So, as families, we come from families as well. And this is all a chain in a link. Now, if when, for instance, in my case, I knew from a very young age this can't be the way that it's meant to be. Like a lot of fighting and toxicity in the relations in the home, violence, no way of um, handling or navigating conflict. I knew that that wasn't the way I wanted it to be. But still, all these messages come into the subconscious from a very young age. And at a certain point, I was like, well, it's up to me to break that chain.
Yeah.
So there was a conscious decision. There was also some information coming from the outside based upon things that I had read, books that I had read, spirituality books, or books on self discovery, self help, all of these, psychology. So they were all coming in from different directions. Then I had children, and then I realized this breaking of the chain is not necessarily breaking the chain and then going forward in one go, but you have to separate the chain.
Mm.
Do you understand what I'm saying? Like if there's a link in a
So,
chain, you have to separate that so that this part can come off and then this part can be free of what
mm.
was before. And that's how I really visualize it in my head. So I'm actually that link in the chain that's kind of being split open.
Okay. So you still have connection to your history. You haven't broken from that. You haven't broken that away, but you want to continue the next link in the chain. You want to be more harmonious, and you want to have you wanna be in touch with
Yeah,
both
I
the future
am.
and the
It's
past, so to speak.
like that's how I experience it because a lot of my own challenges in raising children, I brought all that shit in to my own
Okay.
parenting, even though I didn't want to. So my life has been about bringing consciousness and awareness to all of these old patterns that maybe my ancestors they just did not have.
No,
They were not even
they didn't have
aware.
the tools. No, exactly. They weren't even aware, I think.
I don't think they were aware. They didn't have the tools. They acquiesced to what was given them,
Yeah.
the rules and conditioning from the church, the rules and conditioning from society, from governments, from their own communities, from their own household cultures. And with my own awareness and raising of my consciousness, I see this just doesn't work. This doesn't
Mm.
feel good. I don't want to deem it right or wrong, but I know it didn't feel good.
Mm.
So, what I really, my biggest, highest ambition is to make sure that my future generations, for instance, the children of my children, that they will be free of this conditioning, these unfunctional, dysfunctional patternings of the past, and that they will be able to, because of the work that, because of this separation, this really, and separation is painful,
Yeah.
Um,
It is
sometimes a lot of
painful.
people hold on to their dysfunctional family connections because being disconnected from that is also painful.
Well, they're scared that they don't know where they're going to end up if they
True.
yeah,
So alone is where you end up, but that can be a birthing place for
Exactly.
moving forward.
A waiting place, a waiting room. So how would you describe how would you say that this dysfunctionality played out in your ancestors' lives and also in your early life before you came to the realization that something has to change? What did it
How did the
what did it
dysfunction?
the dysfunctionality, how did it play out? What was it about? In what way was
Um,
it dysfunctional on this
pa-
female side of your
okay, so
family?
painful relationships,
Okay.
um, disconnected, um, un you know, mothers and babies, they bond, but when a mother cannot bond properly or in a healthy way. So maybe this word of dysfunction means unhealthy. So I know from the stories of my mother, and I know from the stories of my grandmother, that none of these women ever had healthy bonds with their mothers.
Mm.
Now, why was that? That could be for many reasons. There were many, many children, and for me, that doesn't really matter. Could be because of the conditioning that they got from the church. A woman's place is in the house to keep her mouth shut. Then, then you've got a lot of conflicting ideas when emancipation comes, and a female is now um, sort of societally pushed into the workplace, but she doesn't really want that. And she's got the conditioning from the church, keep your mouth shut and stay in your place. But society is saying, go out into the workforce and make your way. So that's also very unhealthy. There's a lot of dysfunctionality in all of these conflicting um, conditions and beliefs and assumptions and premises of the world that are false premises, really. So I think that it boils down to unhealthy relationships, unhealthy bonds, unhealthy ways of communicating,
Mm. And
which
there's
has
been
led me,
domestic violence as well
yeah,
involved.
well, yeah, when you don't have healthy ways of communicating, then you communicate with aggression, physical or verbal,
Mm.
emotional. Um, and this aggressivity, this aggression, of course, is very unhealthy. And then you, as a young child, you learn that these are the ways, because this is the blueprint you've been given,
Yeah.
or the example you've been given of how to function within a house. Yeah,
And
and
you
I
describe
know that I'm not alone in this. I know that this is
no,
like
but
a lot of
so many
people grow
people
up like
don't
this.
wake up. So many don't get aware of what's actually happening. And it's wonderful
Mm.
that you're seeing this and you're breaking free of it. So, and you describe yourself as a recovered Christian. You've mentioned religion a couple of times here. In what way would you say that you are a recovered Christian? Are you still, you're not Christian? You don't define yourself as Christian, or are you a
I
different
try.
kind of?
I try not to identify with. Um, yeah, one of the pinnacles of doing um, inner self work is breaking free from identity. So asking the question again and again and again, who am I? Who am I? So who am I
Mm,
without this label or without this identity? Who am I without the identity of my gender? Who am I without the identity of the country I'm born in? Who am I without the identity of the religion that I was brought up in? So I think that would be the best description of a recovered Christian. At the same time, I see how much it has formed me. Um, I also see how much it has disformed me. Um, and but it also was the catalyst for my curiosity of what is behind all this and what is beyond all of this,
mm,
you know. Um, and yeah, I feel myself that it really fucked me up in a
mm,
big way.
mm,
And at the same time, it's because of having this history that I also feel that I'm more open to being connected with spirit. My first spiritual experience was in a church. I was a
Okay.
young child. I felt it. Like I felt it. And at the end of the day, that's really what it all boils down to is like you feel connected to something that's not of this physical
True. And then it doesn't
material
really matter
world
where it happens, if it's in the church or in the mosque or whatever, or in the
or
woods.
on in the woods or on the mountain or on the toilet. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah. I
really,
know.
it has to do with, though, and this is what I notice. I'm going to make a quick jump to the communities that I'm involved with now, which is like the yoga community or a Tantra community. This has all to do with your connection to spirit. And I think that I might not have been as open for this if I hadn't been in these experiences as a child where there was ceremony, where there was ritual, which you find this all over the entire world.
Mm. Mm.
This is my understanding today is that ceremony and ritual is as personal as each individual, and it
Mm.
doesn't have to be given from a particular mold as
No.
to this is who you are and this is the way you have to do it, and you have to do it the way people outside of you say that you have to do it. Because when you're really connected, like even if you go out in nature and you're collecting leaves or something, if
Mm.
you're really connected, then you're going to be intuitively doing your own ceremonies and rituals.
True. Yeah. Well, the problem I have with traditional religions is one thing is what you're mentioning here. There's a lot of dogma that you're supposed to follow, but also that all of these big traditional religions they separate God from man or from human beings, I should say, which I think is wrong.
I
That's
would,
the main, in my view, that's the main problem. There's a separation. You're told that you are very small and insignificant, and God is up there, and you have to do certain things in order to enter God's
okay.
realm.
May I interject this? Because this is
Sure.
exactly, I thank you for this perspective, because this is exactly what I mean by recover.
Okay.
I have learned, I have experienced it is not out there. It is the separation that is the root of all pain.
Yeah.
And when you feel this union inside of yourself, which is spirit, which, is it out of us? Is it in us? As below, as above, as
Yeah.
below, we're all one. When you feel it, experience this oneness, there's no need for religion. There's no need for this dogma.
True.
And that's what I mean when I say I feel like it fucked me up because it just took away my spirit in one way.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're spiritually awakened or mature, you feel intuitively that there's something wrong with this
Yes.
dogmatic way of looking at things. You just feel it inside that there's something missing here. There's something
It's
lacking.
not healthy.
It's not healthy, no. So
It's not healthy.
I think it's gonna change big time. Religions as well as many other things. We might come back to that in this big question conversation that we're having. Let's talk a little bit before that about your concrete experiences. You worked when you were younger with so many things that many people don't. I mean, you've provided services in the restaurant and theater businesses, but also as a model and in the sex industry. And in 2007, you won a bodybuilding competition, I understand. And it appears to me that your body has been the focal point of much of what you've been working with. Would you agree on
Yeah.
that? So can you
I would,
talk a
I
little bit
would,
about how that was and why you ended up working with these things?
um, hmm.
If it's
First,
even possible.
yeah, the first thing is like, yeah, I find it indeed there's some resistance speaking about this, and at the same time, this is part of my journey. Okay,
Yeah.
so there's always been a separation, I believe, in me between my body, the material, and my spirit. So basically, my path is actually reuniting these two, and for all intents and purposes, I can share that I was sexually abused earlier on in my life, which gave me the imprint that my body was really the only thing that was of any value.
Mm.
Um, Now, fast forward to where we are now, I call it the pinnacle of my life at midlife. I am
Fantastic.
now, um, also because of the teachings of Tantra and the path that I've been on for the last 4 or 5 years, which is very tactile in one way, but there's this infusion of spirit or this other inner body, which is, I call it the non physical part, and integrating these two. And this is something I'm actually still doing. So I was in resistance for a long time. Actually, not a long time, but I also with the podcast that I'm doing and something, I was like, okay, now it's time to not have the focus on the body. But you know what? This is why I'm here. Like, I cannot not have the focus on my body.
Mm.
So now I'm coming to the conclusion that it's my body and the energy of my physical form that is, one of my tools that I can
Wow.
use
Yeah.
to, um, to support, to serve. And if I don't do that, then I'm actually where I was before, having this disconnection.
Yeah.
So it's actually connecting. Um, and somehow, maybe we'll get to that in this conversation. It's instead of resisting this bodily form that I have, wanting to be any different or wanting it to be less than or more than or any of this,
Mm.
like
Mm.
less sexy or, um, you know, more this way or more that
Mm.
way,
Mm.
actually to integrate it with my whole being
Mm.
and to use this great gift that I've been given, which is my body.
That's wonderful. I mean, there are so many spiritual people who are kind of discarding their bodily uh, aspects as something less important. But as you say, I mean, we are here in a physical body in this three-dimensional world. We're born here, and apparently we're supposed to have bodies. So I mean, why not just embrace that and go with that? And I guess we are all different. Some people feel a closer connection to their body, and some feel a less close connection to their body. So I guess you just have to feel in who you
Well,
are.
that's kind of funny that you say that you have to feel in, but when you're less connected with your body, it's more difficult to feel in.
That's true.
So our bodies are like the antennas.
Yeah.
They're like these. That's how we plug in.
Mm.
So we actually need to be in very much in contact with our bodies, and also that the pleasure that they can bring us, and
Mm.
you know, the body, the matter is the physical form for the catalyst for everything that's
Yeah, yeah, it's really
non-physical.
yeah, I know.
It's
I've
very
sometimes not
fascinating.
been as good at that, and it's not just sexuality. Of course, there are so many other aspects of this. You can feel pleasure from. I mean, there's so many things. Let's dive a little bit into that. We're now, I think, entering the story of your self-healing process here. You've been talking a little bit about your background and your the wounds and all that, but your self-healing process has involved you discovering, as you mentioned, yoga and tantric yoga. This has been
Yeah.
part of your personal evolution. So when did you discover these tools, and what have they meant for you and your evolution?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I thank you for asking that. Um, I think that from a very early age, I knew all these things about me, but they were not accepted. So they were shut down because when, for many years, I would see yoga or I would see things about Tantra. And I was in environments that I couldn't really share or talk about that with anyone else. It wasn't mainstream. And my entire life, I've always noticed that the way I think and the things I'm drawn to are never mainstream until years later.
Mm. Okay.
So even the things I'm into now, I
Early,
know that one
early. So,
day,
so we better look at you. What you're doing now, everyone's going to be doing in 20 years.
I think so. In 20 years, everybody will like, oh yeah, of course, we have
She
to
was
go to,
right. Yeah.
you
Blossom
know.
was right.
uh, so when I actually started practicing yoga, um, I was also doing that parallel to having therapy. And I think that if it hadn't been for the yoga, my therapy wouldn't have been so successful.
Mm.
And um, I, yeah, it was really one of the moments that started me going, really embracing this path of transformation. And it's taken me many years. One of the things that I feel very strongly about is that if there's something that I could do or give to people is to help save them some years.
Yeah.
If there was any way that because of what I've been through would help someone else's process accelerate, even though I know that every process is very individual. I very often question if it has to take 15, 20, 25 years to transform.
Well, some people need many years and some people change quickly, but it does. I mean, time is just relative. It's a relative concept. So it
True.
doesn't really mean anything. Once you're there, when you reached your goal, you're there. I mean, then the journey there doesn't really matter that much. So if it has taken 15 years or 15 days,
Well,
same difference.
okay. Let me be. No, what I mean by that is that um, I would love to see people step more into or embrace their potential to see with fresh eyes who they really are earlier on in the game.
I understand.
Because I think that for society and moving forward as a whole, as a planet, as humans, that the earlier that we start to shine and to rise and own our own power, the better off we're all going to be collectively, also as a planet. Because the more empowered people that there are walking around, the better off we all are.
Mhm.
So I
That's
think
true.
that is what I mean by that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
I,
so yoga
yeah.
and tantra was something you discovered even already before you moved to Holland, or has this been?
The funny thing is that the more I know about Tantra, the more I can look back at my life and say, oh, I was already doing those kinds of things, only
Yeah.
without knowing about it, without having a name, without having it in a particular container or with a particular label. Um, Again, that has to do with the body and being in connection with spirit and having very spiritual experiences through the act of sexual connection, whether
Mm.
that was with myself or with others.
Mhm.
And I never realized why weren't other people experiencing what I was experiencing during
Mm.
sexual contact.
Can you just describe tantra a little bit for the listeners? I'm sure that most don't really know exactly what it
Well,
entails.
in the ancient wisdom tradition of Tantra, it's not really a religion per se. It is a wisdom tradition coming from the East. In China, we have the Taoist tradition, which also utilizes in some of their practices the sexual energy, which is in all of us. If it weren't for sexual energy, none of us would be here because that's how we were created.
Mm.
You could almost say that the Big Bang or anything before that was also sexual energy. And these traditions, so Tantra coming from India, these traditions utilize this energy to transcend and to connect. So you can transcend this uh, matter and get into connection with that which is beyond our matter, our physical. You can also use it to um, uh, come into union with, so that you have all of this feeling of oneness Um, and so, also on a physiological level, on a biological level, there are things that happen during um, uh, sexuality, using sexual energy, whether that can be many ways of doing this. Let's just say in orgasm, there's something that happens in our biological makeup that
Yeah,
gives us
for
these,
sure.
yeah, they give these moments of oneness, of being connected with something greater than ourselves. That's why a lot of people always want to come back to um, this. I need to be with another human being. I need to have this, you know,
Yeah,
sex so that I can have that. What Tantra leads us and guides us into knowing through all kinds of exercises is that it doesn't have to be like that. There's many ways to reach orgasm. So through breathing, through movement, through sound, through meditation. You can do this with yourself or with another individual.
fascinating. So you mean that the orgasm, the feeling, the actual physical feelings you have when you have an orgasm is something similar to that you can achieve by not being aroused sexually in the traditional way, but by being
Yes.
aroused in another way, through
Yeah.
meditation or through some kind
Breathing,
of breathing. Okay,
movement. Um,
interesting.
yeah. Yeah. I
And is it
start.
different if you do it by yourself? Is it different than if you're doing it with if you're doing these exercises together with another person?
So doing these exercises together with another person enhances it and brings it um, up or down, how you want to look at it, brings it a depth to it,
Yeah.
more depth. However, what certainly modern tantra, what it's really um, focused on is intimacy, relationships, and that all starts here with yourself.
Mm. Mm.
How is the intimacy with myself? With my inner self, but also with my body? Can I be intimate with my own body? How is the relationship with myself? How is the
Mm.
relationship um, with my thoughts, with my thought patterns? How is my relationship with the connection to my deeper intuition, for instance? And through this intimacy of oneself, when we connect with another person, that can lead to even more expansion
Yeah.
for
Well, it's
oneself, but also
I, I
for the connection to another human being.
I guess it's obvious that it's enhanced when you're together with another person. This was a stupid question in a way, but
No, not at all.
still had to
But
ask it. But it is important, as you say. It's very wise what you say, I think, because many people have problems being with themselves because they can only experience this kind of enhanced sense of being something other than the body when they are together with other people. But it's very important, I think, to really, as you say, to reach the peak of that sensation. You need to find yourself first and be comfortable being with yourself, your inner self, and your body, and your whole existence, really. And it's difficult for many people. I've become better at that lately,
mm,
being divorced and but still being having my ex-wife as my best friend. So it's all good, really. And I find it easier and easier to like meditate in the morning and spend a whole day without meeting anyone. It's really fine. I didn't really like that some years ago. I
yeah,
think I was longing for this company all the time, and there's something very important there in what you're saying,
yeah.
be it tantra or whatever, that you really need to be comfortable with yourself first. In order, it's like this saying, you can't love anyone else unless you love yourself. You need
Well,
to love yourself first.
I've been also on that path for a long time, and there are new schools of thought or other schools of thought that are questioning this premise because, of course, in relationship we get mirrored, and we get mirrored often with those things that we don't want to see in ourselves. And
Yeah,
sometimes when we're just alone with ourselves, we don't see those things because we're not getting triggered. However, there is the other side, and this is what I mean by intimacy with yourself. to really know yourself deeply. And sometimes that can happen in connection with another person. This is where it often goes in a direction that's not serving. And
Mm.
that is when you don't then take a step out and go inside and say, okay, what does that person just show me about myself? And then go inside and be with that piece of yourself instead of saying, hey, no, this is you, or getting into this conflict back and forth. Um, and that is, I think, what I mean with intimacy. Uh, really, into me, I see. And most people, when they use the word intimacy, they're talking about a physical intimacy with another human being.
Yeah.
I like to really expand this definition, or expand this word as to what we mean by intimacy. And intimacy is really, it can be, and from my own experience, is can be a path to healing, to becoming whole, to remembering the wholeness of who you are.
Mm. Mm. Wonderful. You have mentioned the concept of ageless living.
Yeah.
Not here in this conversation, but before. I know you've been talking about this. What do you mean by ageless living? Is that what you're doing now?
Well, yes. Well, at the beginning of this conversation, I remember you said something about middle aged. And the first thing that came up to me is the word midlife.
Yeah.
So take age out of the vocabulary
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and even have a new narrative about what it means to be in this life. And we have a span as physical matter goes at this moment in time in history. We can, it is possible to have a healthy life to about 100 years. I think the max is about 110. So I think that we're somewhere in this midlife range.
Mm.
For me, that already takes off a lot of pressure about aging or
Yes, and that also has only a connection. That concept, that mindset, only has a connection to this physical life. If you believe that will live on, that your spirit doesn't die, then it's also a different matter in some ways. But of course, I mean, you only remember this life and you love this life and you want to have as good a life as possible now that you're here. But yeah, I understand what you're saying,
so
and
yeah, the concept of
I think
ageless.
you can. I think you can actually postpone, if that's the right word in this context. You can postpone your your age a little bit if you live more consciously and if you live more harmoniously. I actually think that's a thing.
Yeah, yeah. So I
I mean, you
always
look like
say,
25 here. I'm watching you here on Zoom, and I know you're not 25,
I love the
but
filters that Zoom has, but um, one thing I always say at the end of my podcast, Past the Pause, which has to do with this midlife living, ageless living, I'd rather die living than live dying.
mm,
So for me, this concept of ageless living means that you continue to live a high quality, uh, healthy, happy existence for as long as we are living this particular life in this particular moment of time in this particular body. So ageless living is a concept that has to do with this moment, this time around.
yeah,
Let's
yeah,
just say.
that's
um,
true.
yeah, I have seen some examples in my lifetime of people that are here in this body that's still breathing, but they're
Mm,
just waiting to die.
yeah, yeah, that's
And for
tragic.
me, I would rather just like pull the plug if that's the case.
Yeah,
I'm going
yeah.
to make every single breath.
That's wonderful. Yeah, and there is only the now moment. Actually, I mean, the past is just an illusion, and the future is also an illusion. And of course, you have to plan and all that. I'm sure you've listened to Eckhart Tolle and what he says about these
Yeah,
things, and
I have. Yeah.
I think it's true. And it's really, well, life is much more interesting and much more fascinating and much more wonderful if you live in in the present moment, because then you can be on par with everyone you meet. Young people, old people, doesn't really matter. I mean, if you meet if you're 57 and you meet someone who's 25 and has something really interesting to tell you that day, then that's what you do that day. That's what you delve into that day, and you have a fantastic conversation, exchange of ideas with this 25-year-old, and that's it has nothing to do with it. The age has nothing to do with it. It's really just that's the interaction that you have that day. Next day, you might meet someone who's 97 and says something that's interesting, and it's really, as you say, just to make every breath matter as much as the last breath.
This is
So
beautiful what you're saying, Anders. It makes me, it really gives me, it's a great gift for me as far as this concept of ageless living and what I was talking about, the kind of family relations that I come from. When we are living from this moment and there's this agelessness about it, then there's also no hierarchy in families, if you know what I mean. We could then have an
yeah, exactly.
interaction with our children from out of this moment. What is being said? What is really being communicated?
Yes.
What is my ability to respond to what's needed in this moment? And on the other end of the spectrum, we would
Yeah.
then be relating differently to the ones that have been here longer.
Yeah.
And the ones that have been here longer and the ones that have just gotten here will also be, having this interaction that is, just high quality and very
High
healthy.
quality. Yeah, yeah, it's really good. And I have experienced so many encounters with people that I have come to realize or believe that people are, I mean, their souls, their spirits, their souls are on different levels when they are born here, because you can meet young people who are wiser than people that are 20 years older than you.
Yeah,
You can meet 75-year-olds that are so immature, that are like acting like children. So age really doesn't have much to do with the thing. Of course, you have less practical experience when you're 25 than when you're 57 or so. But I mean, that's really on the surface. That's not really that important.
yeah,
The main thing, whether you can see into another person's soul, so to speak, or whether you can listen to another person and learn something from another person, and feel empathy and all those kinds of things. And the 25-year-old can do that just as well as a 75-year-old. So, well, you get my point. It's really, the more you think of it, the more you act, you notice that in people when you meet them and have encounters. You realize that it is really like that. Then, of course, very, very small children, they need to be helped into this world in many, many ways. They're helpless otherwise. I mean, practically and linguistically and everything. So that's obvious, of course. That's self-evident. But once they're out of childhood, once they're whatever 18, 20, 22 years old, they shouldn't be regarded as children to anyone, really, not even to their. I mean, it's difficult as a parent sometimes. You tend to
mm,
say that, oh, when I was your age, XXX, and
mm.
then when you get to my age, you will understand. You shouldn't really say those things. It's really uh,
So in this
condescending.
in this connecting and in this relating, and I'd like to take it back to being intimate with yourself. When you're really intimate with yourself, you can better listen to another person because you just get yourself out of the way. You're
Yeah,
aware, you can hear, and then you're like, hey, I'm with this person now. I need you can I'm gonna get out of my own way and just really listen to what this person has to say, irregardless of where they are on any kind of, you know, uh, linear scale having to do with age or the amount of years that they've been on this earth. I think that that's a big thing that, parents with younger children tend to do. And when we could get out of our own way and just really listen and be completely present with the child, just as we are completely present with our lovers, then amazing things happen.
mm,
Really amazing things happen. Because if somebody feels seen, heard, listened to, have full attention, then whatever the problem was just disappears anyway. There's
Yeah.
nothing that needs to be solved.
No, that's true.
Yeah.
And it's so liberating to do that. It's hard in the beginning, but once you learn how to
Yeah.
be really, as you say, present and forget about yourself, just get out of your own way.
Yeah.
It's a liberating process because I mean it's a heavy burden to carry around yourself and your ego mind all the time. It's a burden.
All these ideas and
Yeah,
you know, to tie it back around to Tantra and sexuality, we have these ideas of how we're supposed to look, how we're supposed to perform, how it's supposed to be. If we were to get out of our way and let our bodies and the energies flow through us, everyone would have very unique and individual experience that would
yeah.
be mind blowing because they wouldn't be following any kind of protocol that they've learned somewhere on the internet.
No,
um, and this is the same with any kind of relating, but this is how I tie Tantra into everyday life, because everyday living is using these things that we learned there and then applying them also to the relationships with our children or with our neighbors or our grandmothers or grandfathers. Yeah.
yeah. We shouldn't talk about age, as you say, but there is one thing when with women at a certain age they reach menopause, and you have started this podcast called "Past the Pause," which I love the name of. So, what is that about? You wanna well just talk about it. How did you come up with that idea, and what's your
Well, I didn't come up with the idea. It was given to me. This was in one of those, I would say, kind of
oh
rare
was a download?
yeah, it was what they call a download.
Yeah.
And originally, and I'm still working to fine tune this, but in the beginning of this conversation, I said that many different things about my own mm, person got muted, got paused when I was a child. That was originally the idea behind Past the Pause. And then I realized that I needed to have a particular audience. And I looked at myself and I was like, well, what pause am I in? Or, where's the direction I'm going? So it eventually ended up being about midlife and
Okay.
ageless living. And I think that I'm going, I'm planning the idea that I'm getting is to open up my interviews, the podcast, for anyone that has anything to say about being paused or
Hmm.
coming out of a pause. So it's also about this liberation. It's also about emotional liberation, liberation of the ideas that we have about menopause.
Hmm.
Who says that all of these symptoms that we're supposed to be having, who says that everyone's going to have?
No.
We get fed this from early on. And also we get fed an idea that after 50 we're invaluable to society. After 50 we have no right to wear miniskirts, or after 50 we have no right to I don't know, have a lover or whatever. And we find a lot of these people that are in midlife after having long-term relationships are stepping out. So they're going to be actually kind of reversing. I had a very long youth. Now I'm ready to step into a more long term something. A lot of
So
people are
now you
stepping.
are 25, as I said. It
Yeah,
was right then.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. um, yeah. So, Past the Pause is really about this idea of midlife being a pinnacle of opening up, liberating ourselves from everything that we've been taught, everything that we think that we know about ourselves, stepping into this unknown. What the hell's going to happen between in the second half? What,
Hmm.
we don't know. You
Hmm.
know, of course, we don't know that when we're 25 either, but we're kind of given outside of ourselves, given from our societies and our cultures, sort of a blueprint. Follow this, and you can be healthy and happy, and you can have the white picket fence, and you can have the family, and it's all going to be perfect. But it doesn't necessarily work like that. So I find that um, what's needed right now when I look at around me, the other people that are my age, is that the liberation from our emotions, from our ideas, our belief systems, our limiting thought patterns. That this is what really will release us into the second half of agelessness, living every day without the,
Yeah,
just like if I die today, it's going to be great because I'll be doing something that brings me so much joy, that
I
kind of
love that.
idea.
I love that. And you want to harness the energy, the combined power of sexuality and of the heart. I guess that's
I
what Tantra is a lot of is about to a large extent.
very
Uh,
much so.
and the sexuality is, and you've been talking at length about this during this conversation. So I think the listeners understand that it's so much more than what we traditionally put into that concept, sexuality. It's really very superficial, often in our culture, superficially described.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, absolutely.
but it is also that. I mean, it's so many things, but it's also that. So, and there's a lot of taboos still around sexuality, which you wouldn't actually think, considering what happened already in the 60s with the sexual liberation movement and all that, and porn being ubiquitous, and there have been so many things happening, but still there are a lot of taboos around sexuality. And maybe there should be, or maybe there should be, well, there should be privacy, of course, but some taboos are a little bit ridiculous, I guess. So why do you think
Well,
there are so many taboos around it?
because of religion.
Okay, yeah, well, that's one explanation.
Absolutely, because of many dogmas and rules coming from I don't know where that say no sex before marriage.
Mm.
There are, let's
But
just
that's
say,
that's 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 many decades ago, I think. In my, well,
no.
at least part of
I
the world where I've,
Believe me,
yeah.
I see. I know a woman my age who has a son who's 23, and he just now got married to a Muslim woman just so he could have sex with her. Now,
Okay.
6 months
Mm.
into the marriage, he realizes, shit, we should have never gotten married.
Oh, that's so bad.
So
Mm.
even today, yes, I've in my experience, but also in my observation, I see that I am an observer. I
Mm.
like to observe what's going on. I don't always say much about it, but I've had now 5 decades of experience in this time around. And I've seen that there are cycles. Even now, with what's going on in the world, this is a cycle. This too shall pass. It's not necessarily something really new. Uh, we've had plagues before in the past, hundreds of years ago. Um, what have we learned? There's we could that would be a whole nother hour if we went into that topic. But
Yeah.
um, uh, help guide me back around wherever
Well,
we go.
I also want to ask about male and female sexuality, because you've been delving into this
Oh
subject
yeah, but
so
we
for
were
so
talking
long,
about the
and
heart and the connection of the.
yeah,
Um,
we were. And then there's
this is
this superficial view on sexuality, and then
yeah,
there are the taboos, and then there's also this layer of separation between male and female sexuality, uh, which, well, you can also talk for hours about those things.
we
It's
could
really,
do. I could highlight it, and already I would like to um, make a
the
slight
Me Too movement and
correction.
all that's happened 3 years ago,
Yeah,
when this was highlighted. But it was also very superficial, of course, once again. But still, was interesting that the subject was touched upon.
yeah,
So the
yeah.
difference, if there is any, between male and female sexuality, and what that really means, and how important it is it overblown? Is it?
So when you come to a moment in your life when you would like to explore this, first thing that is the first sort of false premise. It's not necessary. I mean, you can look at biologically and physiologically that there are differences in female and male sexuality. When you look at us as from an energy point of view, we have masculine energy and feminine energy. And when you, as an individual, as a sovereign being, you can take these qualities, these energies, and you can integrate them into yourself. You're also working on your holistic being. You're healing, you're being whole, you're being unified and united with yourself. That's what I was talking about earlier about self intimacy. From out of this place, your relationships and also sexual relationships can really expand because you are playing with more of energies than just the female energy or female sexuality is that of a receptor, of receiving. A masculine energy would be one of giving, of penetrating. But when we are aware of these energies within ourselves, even as a female, I could actually then penetrate someone else
Mm.
by getting into contact with that energy, that masculine energy within me.
Mm. And be the driver, be the one that it takes the
That
initiative.
on top, you
Also,
might say, or,
no, well,
but because it's more of
but
an
yeah,
energetic role exchange.
yeah.
Um,
And it's a dance, I guess.
also,
So
very
as you
much,
say, you can exchange roles
yeah.
during a sexuality act or
But also in your life,
in
there are
your
some
life.
moments that you need to be in your masculine energy to get things done. I
Yeah.
find that that is something that I could really work on.
Mm.
And to be quite honest, I like to, as a very much embodied feminine energy, I would like to see that masculine energy come from outside of myself. And
Mm.
yet I know that I have it within inside of myself.
Yeah, everyone has it, but two different degrees, I guess.
Yeah.
So we're all, yeah, we have our blueprint when we're born, and with the personality that you can, I guess, uh, you can change it a bit, of course, during the course of life, but it is kind of a blueprint. I can feel that I have an inner personality that's there all the time, but I have honed it, so to speak, during my life. So it's tried to hone off the sharp edges
Yeah.
and cultivate the good parts.
Yeah.
So, but it's something that it's some kind of core there.
Yeah. I believe that we have an essence for
Yeah,
sure. Um,
personality essence.
but yeah, it's so funny. I'm looking on my bookshelf. My latest book that I'm reading is called Personality Isn't Permanent
Oh,
by Dr. Benjamin
interesting.
Hardy. Yes. And which really helps me because
Mm.
at one point in my history, I was labeled with a personality disorder.
Oh,
And now I'm learning also through the works of Dr. Joe Dispenza, who's
mm.
really shows literally in a scientific way how we can change the makeup of our brains, which then also proves that we can change our personalities and they are not permanent.
Yeah,
What
yeah,
you're talking about, I feel, is some sort of a original essence of who each person is when they come into this
yeah.
world.
You might call it that, perhaps. Yeah. I mean, it depends on how you define personality.
Also,
What
it
I what
depends
I
on
what I mean by that, I've been interested in astrology, for instance, for almost all my life. So I think that's a part of it, and that's just a way of describing what's imprinted on you, what your blueprint is when you're born.
Mm,
You can describe it in different ways, but and the main thing is that there's nothing bad or good about those things. It's just different aspects of how you can react to what's happening in your life, and you can, as you say, you can have dominance of female energy or masculine energy, and that goes for women and men. I mean, there are men with a dominance of female energy,
yeah,
and vice versa. So I think that's something that you have, and
absolutely. I agree with that. I agree
during
with
your whole
the
life, and then you can learn to live with that, and learn to harness the good parts of that, because there's good in every trait. Every personality trait has a good and a bad side, so to speak. There's two sides of the metal.
yeah,
And you can always hone and cultivate the good part if you want to.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So that's what I mean by that. Okay,
yeah.
so let's there are so many questions here, and there's so little time. Although time doesn't exist, we only live in the now moment. But
we could make it a 2-hour podcast if you
yeah, we
like.
could do that. We can do that. There is a clock here ticking, which is really irritating. Anyway, you talked beforehand here about the name of my, and also in the beginning of the conversation about the name of my podcast, Mind the Shift, and you agree that there is a shift. You also talk in these about these things, and talk to me a little bit about the times that we are living in. You have said or written somewhere that this present crisis, if that's what you want to call it, is a love song. What do you mean by that? Sounds beautiful. Did I write that?
I don't recall saying that. A love song.
Or yeah, I think you wrote that actually, but maybe
yeah,
you
it
mean
could
something
definitely
like
be
it has a positive. It could have a
I
positive
will.
meaning.
I would love to expand on that. I feel like I grew up in a terminal crisis, as it were. I mean, every day waking up, not no, I sometimes equate it to growing up in a war. Now, I
Mm-hmm.
know that my war was different than having to walk over dead bodies. I get that. I get that that's very different. But I think that the similarity is waking up and just, that nervous system is always, that nervous system is always in fight or flight because it's always scared. It's always in fear. So fast forward to this being crisis. If I had not gone through that crisis as a child, and I think continued, we just talked about what our essence is. So for me, I feel like I have a genuine essence of love. And that has, going through crisis has been able to show me what I don't want so much as to illuminate what I do want. So I see the inherent value of crisis being one that can illuminate what we really want. And now, if we can shift, if we can take our minds and shift it to that which what we really want, what we're calling in, harmony, what you talk about a lot, harmonious relation with the earth that we walk on, that we ask to give us so many resources constantly, unforgiving, unrelentless. We ask from our Mother Earth to just keep on supplying us. And when we can, so using this crisis as a catalyst for shifting the focus, taking our minds and shifting the focus onto peace, onto harmony with ourselves. Again, it starts with self intimacy. What is my relationship with the peace within myself? Am I very peaceful to myself? Am I kind? Am I loving? Am I friendly to me first? Because from out of this mindset, we're going to talk to you. We're going to talk to my neighbor. We're going to talk to the person on the street. We're going to talk to our politicians. But if we're not coming from this mindset, if we're coming from the fear that this crisis is already giving us, then we're also talking to everyone that we want outside of us to change the world for a better world. We're talking them out of this energy of fear. So to me, the crisis is a love story when you can see it as giving you the gift of what I really want. And then cultivating these feelings of harmony, of balance, of abundant resources, of prosperity, of bliss and joy and celebration and this kind of life, because the crisis is showing us all of the things that we don't want. So we need to be really mindful to shift our focus and be really very, very, very mindful of the emotions that we're feeling on a daily basis.
Yin and yang.
Yeah, absolutely.
When we're having what we don't want, we have to focus on what we do want. And
Absolutely.
we wouldn't realize what we do want unless we saw what we actually don't want.
Yeah,
Sometimes we need to
exactly
see.
that.
Sometimes we need to
Exactly
see. Yeah,
that.
I understand what you're saying. It's really good.
It
Then
is
then it is a
my,
love song.
sorry?
Then it is a love song.
Yeah, and it is my hope and it is my wish and my blessing that the listeners also hear this,
Yeah.
that they can hear it in the way that you also just heard it. Yeah.
Hopefully, yeah, I'm sure. So there's a need for rising consciousness, of course, and many people are talking about that we are seeing a rising consciousness. I believe so too, but sometimes you can despair, of course, but that's only if you look on things shallowly. But if you look a little bit more deeply, I think you can see that there is a shift happening.
Yeah.
And there's also this need to, well, it may sound a bit callous because we've been talking about the energy of the heart and the need for love and all that, but there is a need to look upon things in a neutral fashion also. So
Yes.
neutrality is actually, it's not callous,
No,
it's
it's,
very soothing and
yes.
healing, because if you look at things from a neutral perspective, you can see clearly,
Yes.
what's happening.
Yeah.
And a little bit like you were saying before, if you stand beside yourself when you involve in some other person fully, for instance, you can do that on, you can utilize that on society as a whole also. So you can
Absolutely.
just kind of just look at it from a neutral perspective, and you can see, oh,
Yeah.
that's really crazy. Why are they doing that? And strange. No, I'm not going to get involved in that because it looks stupid.
This is okay. This is ageless living. When you look at things from out of the eyes of a child, they don't have really, I mean, they have an innate, deep, like an intuitive knowing of what is right and wrong.
Yeah.
However, a lot of what I teach or bring to other people is this idea of neutrality. When you take wrong or right, good and bad out of the equation,
Mm,
you are just looking through eyes of, okay, there is this thing.
mm,
I don't know if it's good or bad. What's it teaching us? What's it doing? Just being this innocent curiosity constantly. Oh, there's people that are governing a large body of people, and they're telling me that I should be doing this. Why?
yeah.
And is it is I'm curious, so I'm going to do some research. I'm not going to just only go to the left and research, but I'm going to go to the 10 and the 20 and the 30. I'm going to go through the whole spectrum of research. I really don't have time for that. Okay, so I'm going to feel into my body.
Mm,
I feel like I'm okay.
yeah.
I'll go on the train and I'll just continue to live my life the way I've always lived my life. And
Mm,
I have something with me. If somebody should talk to me about it, I'll say, okay, well, if it makes you feel better, I can do that.
mm,
But I continue. So it's looking through the eyes of innocent curiosity and
yeah.
then feeling in or doing the research. I mean, if you got all the time in the world to do the research and come up with a very scientific,
Mm, mm,
reasons, or you can really like, I have this conversation very often. And at the end of the day, I come back to this one thing. And I would love to, I get this from Teal Swan. So I'll give her credit. Thank you, Teal. She says, when we take the best interest of the other as our own best interest, then really we are creating the world that we want to live in.
oh yeah, yeah.
So
That's
if
so wise.
it's,
Mm,
yeah, if it's in your best interest because of whatever your makeup is, that I put something on, then it's also in my best interest to put that thing on
yeah, yeah.
because you're going to be feeling better. I'll be feeling better. And we will be at this harmonious vibration, which is, yeah. But
That's
if everyone's resisting, like, well, I'm not going to do it because I don't want someone to tell me what to do, or someone else is going, I'm only doing it because people are telling me what to do.
then we're creating more polarity,
Exactly.
polarization, and
Yeah.
that's not really the way forward. But yeah, Those words by Teal Swan there, that's the way to go. That's
Yeah.
really true. I love her and what she's teaching.
Oh, good. You know,
Also, yeah,
I
I
hope your
know.
listeners also
Yeah,
know
I follow her on
YouTube.
Instagram, I think,
Yeah.
and I've listened to. You talked about research, and as you said, if you have time, you can delve into all kinds of aspects of this thing that you're talking about that shouldn't be mentioned. But most people don't have time. But you can do some proxy research because there's so many people out there that have the time and who are experts and who are epidemiologists or whatever,
Yeah.
who
Mm-hmm.
have already done the work. So you can search for those
Yeah.
YouTube videos or whatever, or texts or studies, and read them. So you don't have
I
to
really
do the
think that
groundwork.
for me personally, I have stopped getting any of my information from
Mm.
social or these kind of platforms. I feel like if I really wanted to be educated, I would be reading peer reviewed scientific
Oh yeah,
articles. But
excellent.
I leave that work to the scientists. And I really feel it. Sometimes I will see something and then I will read it to the extent that my body gives me a response. And then
Mm.
I can breathe into that. And then it's like, okay, I know what's good for me.
Mm. And then there's also a kind of liberation in the realization that we cannot, no single human being on this planet can have the total overview of everything that's happening, and no one can integrate all the aspects of a big problem like this one that we're talking about now that's happening. It's simply impossible. And if once you realize that, you can have, it's easier for you to have this neutral look upon things,
Mm-hmm.
because you can realize and know that what everyone is talking about is just an approximation. Really, it's an approximation, and you can get that approximation from this standpoint or from that standpoint, and it's never going to be exactly the whole truth. It is simply not possible.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you get snippets of the reality all the time. Your poor little brain can just understand little pieces of what's happening out there. So the most important thing is that you just feel deep within yourself what it is that you want the world to be ruled by in the end, basically, and that's of course love and understanding, and that
Mm-hmm.
everyone that you have understanding for other people's needs, and all
Yeah.
those things. And if you feel that, and if you have that as a steady base core
Yeah.
in yourself, then everything's going to be fine, because you're never going to understand every detail of what's happening anyway, and you don't have to take a stand. You don't have to
No.
be part of something. You just have to live.
And this goes back to really the only thing that we can have influence and impact on. Um, well, we can also have impact in the world, but it starts within, you know. So within, so without,
Yeah.
go inside. I know that in the beginning of this year, I was being sort of bombarded with a lot of information about evil. And
Mm.
my first thought was, if there's so much evil that's being recognized outside, what do these insides of these people that are recognizing this, what do they look like?
Good question.
Yeah. So really, the way that we can have the biggest impact is to do the inner work, and that's maybe the love story about crisis. It invites you to be in love with you, and we can have the most impact on the world, the collective, when each individual. Imagine that 8 billion people were coming from this inner. Um, Clean, healthy energy.
Mm.
Yeah.
Beautiful last words. Where can people find your podcast and other things that you're doing? Do you have a website?
They can find me on Facebook at Meet Dark Blossom, Instagram at Meet Dark Blossom. The podcast is Past the Pause, and it is available on all of the channels where you can find podcasts. So it's on Google and Apple Podcasts, Spotify,
Excellent.
and
So that's Meet Dark Blossom, and Past the Pause.
yeah.
Dear Blossom Bamboo, thank you for joining the show and good luck with everything.
Thank you so much. This was a really amazing conversation. And I thank you also for creating this easy, comfortable, safe space in which we could share and drop into what feels to me right now very much an harmonious frequency. Yeah,
It does.
it
Thank
does.
you. Thank you, Blossom.
Okay.
Bye for now. Bye.
Bye for now.